Hey folks, this is Kalani. We have some big news for this week. The Dragonflight Alpha has evolved and we have now moved into the beta phase. That's huge for testing in general, but also for the state of the game. So with this milestone crossed, we're going to check out how the Dragonflight expansion looks so far, see if anything glaringly obvious is missing, and figure out if the game will be ready for launch sometime this year. We also have some really interesting changes to the talent system, which open up many awesome quality of life options, so there's a lot to talk about. Before we jump in, be sure to hit up that like button and subscribe so you never miss another video. So the big news this week is that the Dragonflight test cycle is taking a huge leap forward. This is incredibly important because the dev team basically said that Alpha was all about adding in new stuff and making sure each part gets enough testing on its own, and then when everything has had specific testing and everything has been added into the testing environment, we'll move forward into beta. So while big changes can still happen, what we see on the beta right now is more or less the full Dragonflight experience. So that means from here until whenever our release date is, the main focus is going to be on balancing, tuning and polish, making sure everything works and is a good experience overall. So instead of testing things piecemeal like we have had up until now, it's all about testing the overall package. So, for example, every class now has their talent tree in the game, in one form or another. Some of these talent trees are still going through huge changes and iterations, so it's not like they're locked in, but at least everyone now has something to work with, play around with, and see the general overall shape and theme of their class and what it's going to look like. I do know that priests just had a big overhaul, death knights have been changed a lot, and druids are due some changes too, so don't give up hope. There have been massive changes to some of these talent trees to get them to a point where not only the dev team seems to be happy with them, but also the community at large seems to be happy with them as well. They're definitely looking at feedback this time around, so if you don't like something as it is right now, be sure to chime in on the forums. We also have access to every Dragonflight dungeon for testing, so not only is that another system that is pretty much feature complete in the beta, but we can now move on to testing the encounters on higher difficulties, and I'm sure Mythic Plus testing will start up sometime soon, where we can see what changes are being made to the Keystone system, as well as what our first seasonal affix is going to look like. I also imagine we'll start to see raid testing, if that's something they're going to do this time around, as more endgame pieces of the Dragonflight puzzle are put together. And of course, every Dragonflight zone is unlocked and fully accessible, so you can level through the whole journey, see how things progress, how you go from one zone to the next, how they overlap and interact, what you learn in each zone, and how the current story of Dragonflight plays out up until max level. Thankfully, a lot of the big story spoilers, cinematics especially, are still not in the beta, so those should stay unspoiled until the game releases for real. And then we also have things like add-ons and character copies being enabled for the beta too, which means the dev team has to be confident with their current progress. Character copies allow us to take what is essentially a real character from the retail game and play through the entirety of Dragonflight, from the introduction to the Dragon Isles all the way up to max level. Add-ons also tend to break things quite a bit in testing environments, so enabling them means most of the base UI should be quite stable. Speaking of the UI, the devs have been trickling in the big new UI changes throughout the alpha period, and that also seems to be something that is either complete or very near completion. If you haven't seen this before, Dragonflight is giving us an entire user interface overhaul. You can move anything and everything wherever you want, pretty much, and you can edit things directly in this new edit mode too. So if you want to rearrange how bars work, for example, that's something we now have access to. If you want them to have more buttons, if you want them to be vertical, all that kind of stuff. It's basically like we have LVUI, but built into the base game with a lot of the same freedoms that those add-ons would have given you. I actually think that with this new functionality in place, I probably won't use any UI add-ons for quite a while when Dragonflight launches. I usually turn them off anyway at the start of every expansion and major patch because they are notoriously buggy and break down a lot, so I typically wait a few weeks for them to stabilize. But this time, I think I might just stick to the base UI in Dragonflight, at least until I get bored a few months down the line. A lot of endgame systems have also started to take shape, like world quests, the new renown grinds, max level world events, different gearing options are sprouting out of the woodwork, and the dragon riding progression system seems to be fully in place as well. That one is quite interesting, by the way, because of right now it looks like you won't have any time gating in it whatsoever. Obviously they can lock it down at any point in the future, but the way it works at the moment is that you just find dragon glyphs out in the world and then use them as talent points. And that's pretty much it. Find all the glyphs and then you can unlock all the talents. Seems like a beautiful progression system to me. So all in all, the beta is shaping up rather well. If there are no major hurdles over the next couple of months, I could actually see Dragonflight launching in November, like those recent leaks were suggesting. It does feel like a complete package right now. But that doesn't mean we don't have anything new to look forward to in this build or even over the next few months. Even though we're now in beta, this build introduced a whole bunch of huge changes to the game. For example, both Evokers and Paladins were just given massive group utility abilities. For the Evokers, they've been given Fury of the Aspects, a new Bloodlust effect. It's exactly the same as all of the other Bloodlust effects, 30% haste with the typical debuff lock, but it's for the brand new class Evokers. So even if you don't have a mage or a shaman or a hunter, you can always bring an evoker for Bloodlust going forward. And then for Paladins, this one might surprise you. It's not another party-wide buff or a return of Blessing of Wisdom. Paladins will actually get a battle res. It's called Intercession, and it works a bit differently depending on your spec. For Holy and Rep Paladins, it's a simple 2-second cast time on a 10-minute cooldown. For Protection Paladins, it will actually be instant cast, which is nice considering trying to cast something while tanking has always been a big no-no, but it will cost you 3 Holy power. Now, I haven't played around with Paladin all too much so far in Dragonflight, but I do remember part of the prop Paladin changes were to make your holy power more important, so having them spend 3 on your battle res isn't going to be very ideal, so hopefully the other classes or the other Paladins in your group can handle the battle reses. There have also been major changes for a lot of classes and their talent trees, but honestly there are so many in this build that it would take too long to go through together, so I will give you a link in the description to the development notes for this build which detail all the class changes right now. The big ones are definitely for Death Knights, Priests and Warrior. Vengeance Demon Hunters also get to see the talent trees for the first time, so all of those classes should definitely go check out those dev notes. And while we're on the topic of talents, there have been some great additions to the talent system as a whole in this build. For starters, we will now have the ability to share and import saved talent presets. So instead of going through point by point copying a friend or a guide, you will literally just be able to import the whole string and be done in one click. This is going to be great for sharing talent sets across the entire scope of World of Warcraft. Yes, it's great for following guides because it's now just copy and paste, but it's also going to be great for discussion in general. Whether it's between players in a class Discord, players in your guild, or even just your friend's circle. Being able to say, check out this talent setup, and instead of them needing a walkthrough of where to put points or a screenshot of the setup, you can literally just send them one string of text. It's almost a no-brainer to include this with the overall talent preset system in place, and I'm really glad the dev team decided to do it. In addition to this, different talent presets will save different action bar setups. So imagine if you have a single target setup and an AoE setup. You don't take the same talents for each setup, which means you probably don't have the same abilities, but chances are you will still be using the same key bindings, right? You just move some abilities around when you swap and then you're ready to go. Well, now you should be able to skip that extra part. So now not only will you have action bars saved for each of your specs, but you can have different bars saved for each of your presets within each of your specs. It's going to be a huge time saver if you're someone who swaps things around a lot. In addition to that, we can also now properly inspect other players and see what talents they are using. The button for this is, well, it's clearly not finished, but you can find a button at the bottom right of the character window when you inspect a player. That will bring up their current talent tree with all the points and where they decided to put them. You can also see PvP talents in the bottom right as well. It would be interesting if we could eventually copy talent strings from inspecting another player, so instead of them having to export and link a string for players to copy, we could maybe just directly import it from their inspect window. And then the last little addition is a search bar for the talent trees. So if someone tells you, yo, Kalani, why don't you have volley? It's totally BIS for this encounter. You can hop into the talents and just search for volley to figure out where it is, why you don't have it, and what you would need to do to pick up that talent point. You don't have to go through all of the talents line by line if you don't know where anything is, which is going to be great for the start of the expansion especially because this will be new to practically everyone. It's also very useful for finding synergy talents that empower other talents or just other abilities. If I search for Arcane Shot in the Hunter trees, it will show me every talent that interacts with Arcane Shot in one way or another. That's going to be great for checking your talents to make sure you didn't miss something that could be a great power boost to some of your most used spells and abilities. And above all else, it's just a really nice quality of life addition. And then the last major change, I guess, for this build is that Shadowlands abilities have been disabled outside of Shadowlands. Shadowlands. This means very little in the grand scheme of things. We all knew we wouldn't be able to use our Night Fae Blinks, Venthia teleports, or Necrolord shields as we head into the new expansion, but this is probably more important for classes that will see their special covenant ability returning in the talent trees. Quite a few have made it in actually, so having access to them in the talent tree and also having access to them via the covenants would be pretty weird, even for old world stuff. So it's all been disabled, and you'll only be able to use covenant powers and abilities in Shadowlands zones and areas. This does actually include Shadowlands legendary gear as well, so all of those abilities will be locked to Shadowlands zones too, meaning they won't work for your leveling adventures in Dragonflight. Interestingly, tier sets seem to have been spared the same treatment, and they do still function everywhere at the moment. That could be intended, in which case we'll get to use them while leveling in Dragonflight, or it could just be a missed borrowed power that the dev team will shut down later. We'll just have to wait and see. But with these powers being restricted to their expansion's content, even if it's just on the beta, it feels like we're one step closer to moving away from Shadowlands and into our next World of Warcraft adventure. And now that we're finally in beta, that adventure isn't too far away. About just over 2 months away, I would wager. But that's how the beta is shaping up so far, as well as some really cool new additions in this week's testing build. Now that beta has started, when do you think the expansion will end up launching? Sometime in November, or maybe even later in December? Where would you put your money? What do you think of the new additions to the talent system, and how often do you think you'll use the import talents feature? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to everyone who's subscribed on Twitch. You can see the names floating by on screen. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching, folks. Good luck and have fun, and as always, I'll see you next time.